the bill.
Denise Roche.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Greens will be opposing this bill because, on balance, we see more harm in it than good. While we do acknowledge that there's some adjustments that could be in order, especially around the area of health promotion, there's several areas in this omnibus bill that cause considerable damage, and in particular I refer to Part 3, and that is the shift of the Charities Commission so that it sits within the Department of Internal Affairs. There's considerable concern within the charity sector, the community and voluntary sector, and I acknowledge other speakers have already talked about this, but I'd like to also touch on some of those issues that these organisations have and their fears around what could happen to the Charities Commission if it was subsumed by the DIA. At the moment, there's about 28,000 registered charities. They've been put on a register by the Charities Commission, who actually act as a watchdog, and they have a reporting regime, which means that those charities are held to account. Their financial records are transparent, and this means that philanthropic organisations are able to go to that register and see what sort of activities those charities have been contributing towards in the last year of their operation. It's a fail-safe, it's a watchdog, that register, and it acts as a measure to ensure that dodgy trusts can't be set up, and there have been attempts to make that happen, so they can't be set up, and they may want to because there's quite a lot of tax exemptions that can happen as a result of being registered as a charity. We believe that the move to shift the Charities Commission into the DIA and this bill basically is premature. The Charities Act is still a fairly new act. There is a review of principles that is scheduled to be undertaken within the next few years, and in fact there is discussion already around the terms of reference for that review. As well as that, the Incorporated Societies Act was also due to be looked at. So to actually jump the gun and say this is what we're going to do to dismantle, and there will be an element of dismantling the roles of the Charities Commission, to do that before those reviews have taken place means that that act that was passed through this House in good faith is failing to meet what it set out to achieve. My colleague from Labour, Louisa Wall, actually spoke quite movingly, I thought, about how the charity sector, the community and voluntary sector, feel about not being listened to. And I join with a lot of other speakers who say, who commented on the fact that the process for the submissions was truncated and didn't lend to a democratic process, and we acknowledge the reasons for that around the election. However, there were many charities that did want to have their say as well. They have actually, though, been sending in letters, and I'd just like to quote from some of the points that have been raised from some of the letters that I've received. And this comes, I think, from Angola. They're concerned about this move because the proposal is based on major errors of understanding in the government's thinking. The lack of understanding, the first point, that charities are set up by ordinary New Zealanders to address an issue that they see in their community, and that such goodwill don't require the involvement of government. Most charities don't receive funding from government, so their responsibility is to the community, not to the government, not to the Department of Internal Affairs. And DIA's involvement is likely to dampen community initiatives rather than encourage them. The proposed change is out of step with the government's own policy push around better public services, because more bureaucracy will result in less innovation. I attended a conference quite recently where 4 international speakers on charities law also said that this move would be a great leap backwards. We will be voting against this bill, and tomorrow when the supplementary order paper comes up to defer Part 3 of the bill, we'll be supporting that as well. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'll take a short call on this bill. No